Now this one could be very special indeed. Only time will tell, of course, and take that with a pinch of salt because this is coming from a huge Trek fan, at least at Star Trek from the 90s. But that said, a huge caveat right up front. I am a bit on the fence about this one for a very specific reason, which we'll get into further into the video, because on the one hand I feel that this has the potential to be a very good game indeed. On the other hand, it's all a bit of a mystery, isn't it? So Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown is a newly revealed space game that we saw back at Gamescom. Now the interesting twist here, the fun hook, is that the game is essentially a what-if scenario. It's a fresh take that blends spaceship management, roguelike structure, and of course consequence-driven storytelling, all mixed in with some rather nice-looking spaceship management. So this should give us an alternative vision of where the Voyager story may have gone. With this in mind, let's break down what the game is, how it plays, and, well, crucially, why it matters for Trek fans, and perhaps more importantly for fans of this channel, why it should matter for people who love space games. It's also worth pointing out that there's virtually no footage about this game at the moment, and that means I can either run the trailer, the 1-minute trailer, endlessly on a loop. I think you'll all get fed up with that. Alternatively, we can put some more interesting visuals on the screen in the form of a space engine. So please do stick with the video, because whilst what you're seeing here isn't technically Star Trek, well, it's not actually Star Trek at all, the information itself is from Star Trek, and it's been very carefully sourced from a variety of different interviews and other sources on the internet, and I've pulled that all together to keep you up to date with this game. So the reveal was at Gamescom 2025, I spoke about it very briefly, and this one was quite a surprise for me. I didn't expect a game, or a new game rather, from what is essentially a quarter-of-a-century old series. Actually, it's older than that now, I think, at this point, isn't it? Voyager hasn't had a standout game since Elite Force back in the year 2000. Whilst Trek has seen its share of recent titles, few have tried to package a whole series as a living, branching survival story. So, Across the Unknown, developed by Hamburg-based Game Excite and published by Daedalic Entertainment, steps straight into that gap with a simple pitch that feels, well, really deeply Voyager-esque. You're lost, your ship is hurting, and your crew is tired, and every decision you make could save their lives or break them. It is an officially licensed game, and it's pitched as a true to canon in tone, yet explicitly it's free to diverge in outcome. That balance is the hook, is what's actually getting me pretty interested here, because what if the crew leaned into Borg technology to survive? What if certain key officers didn't make it past the initial storylines? And what if a familiar adversary instead become a vital ally? The series often flirted with these forks, but you know what? It then reset the whole status quo. If Star Trek was famous for one thing, well, it's famous for many things, but one quirky thing, it was that infamous reset button. At the end of every episode, the reset button was pressed so it could continue on in the status quo from the next episode. So this aims to keep that spirit intact. We've got an idealistic crew under impossible pressure trying to get home without losing who they are in the process, but this is a different story to what we've seen on TV. Ultimately then, this project isn't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, at least it doesn't seem to be that way. It's an attempt to take Voyager's central dilemma, that's see principles versus survival, and make you live with the consequences of your choices, one sector at a time. So the whole thing begins with Voyager in crisis. Hull breaches gape along the decks, critical systems are offline, and power is running thin. You inherit a battered Intrepid-class vessel and the responsibility to make it home. The central loop is intimate and tactile: repair infrastructure, construct or repurpose compartments, and reroute precious power to keep the lights on. Now, life support comes first, of course, but soon you're weighing science labs against industrial fabricators, crew quarters against medical bays, long-range sensors against defensive arrays, and every room is a choice, and every choice has a cost. Meanwhile, the resource scarcity turns these blueprints into somewhat of a mathematical situation. Deuterium fuels, for example, these fuel the engines. Uranium and titanium keep aging systems alive. Food is both logistics and morale as well, and your tug on that constantly tried to balance all these different aspects. For example, spend too long gathering resources and risk a patrol. Dip a shuttle into a treacherous nebula to skim fuel, or push the crew hard to squeeze one more jump out of a failing plasma relay. or throttle back, let people rest, and hope that a raider doesn't sniff out your position whilst you're dimming the lights. Now, games like FTL and RimWorld have made this sort of management feel rather immediate. It's quite consequential, and you often see the impact pretty quickly. And across the unknown clearly draws on that aspect, clearly draws on that idea. The difference here, though, is context. This is Voyager after all, and you know that what has faces here, you know the stakes, you know the tone. In other words, it appears the developers are trying to connect the whole vibe of intensity and limited resources into the same vibe of the TV show. Now, as we move on to other aspects of the game, progress, well, what's that all about? Well, progress is more than just patching holes. For example, there's a full research layer here that lets you tune into Voyager's capabilities, things such as sensors, engines, defences, and more experimental avenues and technology as well. This is where the game kind of leans into Voyager's most controversial temptation. That, of course, is Borg technology. In terms of scale, this looks to have a pretty decent size to it. The Voyager itself is structured across 12 large sectors. So you can chart the course between waypoints, scan for points of interest, and decide whether to linger for resources or push on before trouble finds you. And that some of you will probably feel you've seen in other games such as FTL. But perhaps more interestingly, the whole concept of exploration isn't just a supply run. For example, points of interest may kick off ethical dilemmas. Spatial rifts can offer shortcuts, but maybe they'll be dangerous, and abandoned structures hold stories as well as scrap. Ultimately then, there's a lot of choices here, and choices are certainly a big part of the game. Apparently, one early example centres on an ex-Borg survivor or ex-Borg survivors. This is something that fans of the series will likely recognise. Answering their distress call opens up a path that looks ultimately altruistic. Help them secure tech, and you could stabilise a region riven by conflict. But the deeper you go, the murkier it gets. Elsewhere, the game toys with classic Star Trek quandaries, a prime directive debate, for example, that you can't resolve with just a neat speech. In terms of gameplay specifics, I think we could kind of break this down to 4 different elements. We've got away team missions, ship-to-ship combat, ship interior elements, which would be ship management basically, as well as exploration, which to all intents and purposes is you travelling across the game world. So let's get what we know about all of this. Very little is known about all of that at this point, and we haven't got any actual, well, we've got very little gameplay. So away team missions, this would be ground gameplay. What is known is that you assemble a team based on crew members' individual talents and skills. For example, this would be diplomacy, science or security. And these would then be a case of calling the shots type of approach on the game, minimising your risk rushing in or choosing a scientific type approach. What isn't known is the format. We haven't actually seen whether this is a turn-based approach like we'd see in XCOM with a grid and what do we call it, isometric perspective. Also, what's not confirmed is the UI or how any of this actually plays out. Then we have ship-to-ship combat. We do know that this will be happening. What is known is that it's kind of fought from the bridge. You give commands for offensive, defensive maneuvers, target enemy ship systems, use special weaponry and assign battle stations to various different crews with the relevant skills, and those can be triggered at key moments. So that's very much in line what we'd expect from a classic Star Trek. But here, there's no confirmation again of whether it's turn-based versus real-time, at least as far as I can tell. Do let me know if you know anything better than that. The exact interface or camera perspective is also not known here. The details are basically pretty much unclear across all of these gameplay elements. Something we do have some visuals on and some footage is the spaceship management, although nothing too in deep here. What we can see is that ship management is likely going to be a pretty strong focus. There's talk here of repairing destroyed rooms, securing life support and energy, constructing ship systems, crew quarters, industrial and research facilities. All of this you can decide what to build and when. The side-on perspective puts me in mind of games like Fallout Shelter. But what's unknown is the exact building nature, the interface, how that's actually going to work, whether it's free placement versus predefined slots, for example, the degree of layout freedom and any room agency. As for exploration itself, of course, this is a big thing when it comes to Star Trek. As said, the Delta Quadrant is split into 12 sectors in this game, all of which you can cross. You plot a course here, scan the celestial bodies and locate resources, and then find points of interest. Choices here carry risk-reward as mentioned, but there's no confirmation here on the map format, whether it's node-based, for example, or a free map. There's no real descriptions on the scanning mechanics or a threat meter UI or anything along those sorts of lines, so we don't really know exactly how this is going to play out just yet. So here at the end of the video, this leaves me in a little bit of a quandary, a bit of a pickle, because I do like the entire concept as it's presented about this game. Everything we've seen in the trailer, the visuals look absolutely fantastic for this type of game, and I do like the way the game has been described so far by the developers. What I'm a little bit cautious about is the way we haven't actually seen gameplay specifics. Now, as far as I can tell, the game is set to release at the end of the year, so that's not that far out, and when we are that close to a game release and we're not seeing any gameplay, some might consider that a bit of a warning sign. Others might consider it that it's been held back as a nice surprise. So that explains why I'm a little bit on the fence here, because on the one hand I see where this game has huge potential, on the other hand that potential hasn't really been revealed to us in any deep, meaningful way, at least not just yet. Looking forward to seeing more on this game in the future anyway. Let's hope it's not too long until we hear more about it. Thanks for watching this video all the way through. Do let me know your thoughts and feelings about the game in the comments section. There's another video on the screen right here if you want to watch that one. Do take care, and I'll catch you next time.